Hi, I'm Bill from CJ Pony Parts. The factory 3-link panhard suspension found on the 2005 to 2014 Mustang does a really good job out of the box, but if you're looking to take suspension performance to the next level, an adjustable Watts Link like this unit from BMR is going to be a perfect choice. The Watts Link is going to locate the rear end housing and eliminate any side-to-side movement by keeping the pumpkin centered regardless of the full range of suspension travel. By doing that, it's going to be beneficial for both drag applications along with straight and road course racing. BMR actually takes it one step further by making the roll center adjustable so you can really dial it into your particular application. This unit here is going to fit your 2005 to 2014 Mustang Coupe with an 8.8-inch rear, and today we're going to install it on our 2013 GT500. The BMR Watts Link is a 100% bolt-on piece and it's made right here in the USA. We offer 4 versions of this Watts Link. It's available in either a red or a black Hammertone finish, and there's 2 versions of these arms. This is more of a street version here because it has polyurethane on one end. The other version is going to have the spherical rod ends on both ends and be more for competition or heavy-duty street use. Like all BMR suspension components, the Watts Link is very heavy-duty and will hold up to whatever you want to throw at it. The roll control center link itself here has a 95 durometer heavy-duty bushing that is fully greasable, while the links have urethane bushings that are greasable on one end and Teflon-lined rod ends on the other. The bar itself is going to use a 1x2-inch steel with a 1/4-inch steel plate on the end. All the hardware necessary for installation is all included by BMR. For this installation, you'll need a lift and a pole jack or a jack and jack stands, 1/2-inch ratchet, 9/16 socket, 3/4 socket, 15/16 socket, 15mm socket, 18mm socket, 22mm socket, a couple of extensions, torque wrench, 9/16 wrench, 15mm wrench, 2 3/4 wrenches, a 22mm wrench, an adjustable wrench, an angle finder, straight edge, grease gun, and a hammer. Begin the installation by removing the factory components. In our case, we actually already have an aftermarket BMR adjustable panhard bar, and remove the factory support as well. If you're worried about weight, the Watts Link weighs in around 22 pounds. Once you remove these 2 pieces, you're talking about adding only about 15 pounds to the car. Definitely worthwhile given the performance benefits. Remove the passenger side bolt from the front side. The panhard bar out of the way, we can move on to the panhard support. We'll get the 2 bolts on the other side. And the last step in disassembly, just on the driver's side, we're going to remove the bolt here where the end link connects to our frame. The main part of the Watts Link now is going to go in place and is going to bolt where all the factory hardware was just removed. And what we're going to do though is we're actually going to assemble this on the table to make the installation a little bit easier, because if not, you have to bolt things on this side facing the differential and it gets kind of tight in there. We're going to start by assembling the pivot to the linkage itself. Grab the supplied nuts and bolts. Now we're going to tighten them up. At this point, I probably should have mentioned this earlier. It's a good idea to put all the hardware out on the table. Just make sure you have everything you need and make sure you know where it goes. There's a lot of different sizes of nuts and bolts and washers. Make sure you have everything kind of lined out and you have a game plan before you go forward. And I mentioned before, the roll center is adjustable on the BMR kit, and this is where you decide where you want to set your roll center at. Basically, you can use any one of these holes. The higher up you get, basically what's going to happen is you're going to have higher steering input, like a tighter sway bar feel, on the cost of a little bit of less grip. As you move down, basically it's going to flip. You're going to get more and more grip, but your steering is going to change to get towards the bottom. On a typical Mustang, I would say start one of these two holes here. We're going to use the bottom one. That's going to be a nice average between steering input and grip. I'm going to grab the reinforcement, put the bolt in from the top, put it through the pivot, and make sure you grab the spacer for the bottom. Okay, 1, 2, 3 holes up. And put the 2 bolts through for the reinforcement. These can be tight. You may need a small hammer to tap them through if they're a little on the tight side. This assembly is completed. Now we're going to move on to installing the axle clamps before we bolt this to our car. Now we're ready to install the axle clamping brackets. They are side specific. This is the driver's side. It's the smaller of the two. You want the longer section pointing down. What you're going to do is basically wrap this around the axle. You get the hardware installed and slide it as far out to the end as possible. Just get it roughly in place and get all the hardware just loose for now. We're going to snug these up and then move it up into place. And make sure it's pushed all the way to the outside. Most models are going to have a small cap on this side. Our Shelby has a vent because of the electronics in the back. You just want to do is pop this off there before we install the bracket on this side. We'll do the same thing with the clamp, put it on, just install it loosely. You can see the cutout here is designed to clear that. Again, make sure it's slid all the way outside. And get it relatively straight, and then we're going to snug it up. Once it's in place and relatively straight up and down, reinstall the clip. Again, make sure there's some play in both these. We're going to adjust them later. Now we can actually mount the Watts Link main body. Now you're going to hang the Watts Link. You're going to use the factory hardware for the driver's side, supplied hardware for spacers in the passenger. We'll actually show you the passenger side up close once we get it up into place. Definitely want to get a hand for this part because it's a little heavy to hold up yourself and tighten down. Just get everything hand tight for now. It's going to mount on the outside here of the original bracket. We're going to put some spacers in there so it doesn't crush when we tighten it down. The thinner bolt goes on top and it's easier to put it in from the back of the car. The sleeve can be a little bit of a tight fit. Then we're going to put the bottom bolt in from the front. And we'll put the nuts on them. Okay, and then we'll go back and tighten everything down. Now we're going to torque the upper bolt to 85 foot-pounds. Now we're going to tighten down the hardware on the driver's side. Skipper bolts are going to get torqued to 46 foot-pound. And the last mounting bolt, which is our sway bar bolt, gets torqued to 85 foot-pound. All right, with the link actually bolted up and torqued to spec, now we got to work on the axle mounts themselves. You got to make sure these are to 90-degree angles. You'll need an angle finder of some sort. I have a magnetic one here. You can put it on there and let it check, and we'll see where we're at. That's why we left these loose. We can make adjustments and then tighten them down. As you can see, ours is off a little bit, so we just want to adjust it. Once you adjust it and get it to a perfect 90 degrees, now you want to go back and actually tighten down the hardware in a crisscross pattern starting on the outside. Then you want to repeat the process on the driver's side. Again, make sure you're at 90 degrees, then tighten the bolts down. Before we mount the end links, we're going to actually put some grease in the center pivot here. It's a lot easier to get to before you mount these. Now we're going to install the outer mounts for our links to our axle mount. The trick with the links, you want to get them as close to horizontal as possible. But when you do that, first you want to actually put the suspension under load, and then we're going to set it up. And once these are bolted on, we'll check to make sure it's centered. We're going to use our pull jack to simulate the suspension loaded. If you have a drive-on lift, it'd be even better, or you can put some sort of a jack stand on the axle, whatever you can do to make it seem like it's at ride height. There you go with that one right there. What I'm going to do now is just basically mock this up. Everything is loose, which is perfectly fine for now. I'm going to check the other side and see where that one falls. Okay, and this side looks like we're going to have to go pretty much all the way at the top. Okay, everything looks good space-wise. Now we can tighten it down. Now we mocked it all up for fitment. We're going to reinstall the front bolt now with the correct washer. Install the nut on the back. Now we're going to tighten the brackets to the axle clamps. And we'll do the same thing on the driver's side. Now we're going to tighten down the links to the brackets. Now the last thing we want to do, we have everything torqued down. Before we check to make sure the rear is centered, we want to go back and make sure you torque these 3 bolts down. We did these on the table, so we made them tight. We don't want to torque them down until they're actually on the car. The middle one's going to be torqued to 80 foot-pound. And then 35 foot-pound for the 2 outside bolts. With the car back on the ground now, you want to measure and see if the rear is straight before we tighten the lock nuts onto our end links. If the rear is not straight, you have to adjust the end links to compensate. For example, if this was, say, ½ an inch out, then we'd have to take a ¼ inch off of both sides, shorten this side, lengthen that side to make it actually line up. You can use a couple ways you can do this. You can use a plumb bob. I'm just going to use a straight edge to put some tape on the fender. We're just going to go straight down. Check our clearance with our tire is basically nothing. Maybe a piece of paper would fit between the tire and the straight edge. Now we'll check the other side. And we're going to check on the driver's side. Again, put it straight up against there. You can see in this case we're just barely touching the tire. We're probably, almost an immeasurable amount off. I'm going to leave it alone. That's perfectly centered enough. We're going to go back and tighten the end links. Then we want to thread the upper and lower lock nuts, the end of the bar to tighten them up. then grab a wrench. Okay, with everything adjusted, tightened, and torqued down, the last step, put some grease in the end links. And your installation is finished. The BMR Watts Link is the perfect choice for taking the suspension of your 2005 to 2014 Mustang Coupe to the next level. By keeping the rear perfectly centered regardless of the suspension movement, it's going to allow you to put power to the ground whether you're in a corner or in a straight line. The adjustability of the BMR piece takes that much further, and allows you to really dial it in for your particular application. The installation is a little time consuming, but not terribly difficult. Figure about 3 hours and be back on the road in no time.